I never thought that I would ever be burying my child. I never thought that. I thought my kids would be burying me.
I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it.
London last seen April 5th after being dropped off at her boyfriend's house in Inkster. Her body was found April 26th inside a white SUV in Southfield. By early May, 2 suspects were released, one woman charged with lying to investigators.
4 in the morning, a 17-year-old girl asks her sister for a ride. The destination? Her 23-year-old boyfriend's house. But here's the part that should make your blood run cold. They had been together for 3 years. London Thomas was 14 years old when she started dating Jaylen Pendergrass. He was 20, a middle school child, and a grown man. For 3 years, this relationship continued. Her family knew about it. They didn't approve, but somehow it kept going. And on April 5th, 2025, at 4 o'clock in the morning, London's sister drove her to Jaylen's house in Inkster, Michigan. That was the last time anyone saw London Thomas alive. 3 weeks later, police found her body sealed inside a plastic storage bin, hidden in the back of an SUV parked in a driveway 15 miles away. The Wayne County medical examiner determined London died from asphyxiation. Now, both Jaylen Pendergrass and his mother, Charlotte Pendergrass, are charged with second-degree murder, both facing the possibility of life in prison. But the real question everyone wants answered goes beyond who took London's life. How does a 20-year-old man start a relationship with a 14-year-old child? Where were the adults who should have stopped this? And why was a 17-year-old being dropped off at his house at 4 in the morning when everyone knew this relationship was dangerous? London Ryan Thomas was born with potential. At 17, she was already making waves in the music industry under the stage name Nuskii. Her track, Different Flow, was getting attention. She had dreams of making it big. Her father, Cedric Salisbury, spoke to her every single day. Her grandmother, Justina Martin, had that same close bond with London.
I miss talking to my grandbaby. She always called me. And say, Grandma, I love you.
London was getting ready for prom, preparing to graduate, planning her future. But while London was building her life, there was something in the background that her family couldn't control. Jaylen Pendergrass, 23 years old, no job, no car, wasn't in school, living with his mother in a house on Carlisle Street in Inkster, Michigan. On social media, Jaylen played the role of the supportive boyfriend. He posted London's music videos, shared pictures with her, made it look like he was proud of her talent and wanted to help her succeed. But the timeline tells a darker story. If London was 17 in April 2025, and they had been together for 3 years, that means this relationship started in 2022, when London was 14 and Jaylen was 20. London's family knew she wasn't supposed to be with him. They didn't approve of the relationship, but London kept going back. And here's where it gets complicated. Because at 14, at 15, at 16 years old, London wasn't making adult decisions. She was a child being influenced by someone who should have known better, someone who was old enough to understand the power imbalance, old enough to know that a relationship with a middle school girl was wrong. But Jaylen didn't care, and for 3 years, he kept London in his orbit. For 3 years, London stayed connected to Jaylen through her freshman year of high school, her sophomore year, her junior year. 3 years of her teenage development spent under the influence of someone who should have never been in her life in the first place. And during those 3 years, Jaylen wasn't building anything for himself. He wasn't working. He wasn't in school. He wasn't pursuing a career or building a future. He was living with his 49-year-old mother, Charlotte Pendergrass, in a house on Carlisle Street in Inkster. No job, no car, no apparent direction. But on social media, he maintained the appearance of being the perfect boyfriend, posting London's music, supporting her dreams, acting like he wanted her to succeed. Meanwhile, London was actually doing something with her life. She was working on her music under the stage name Nuskii, building a following, getting attention for her track Different Flow. She talked to her father every single day. She called her grandmother about everything. She had goals. She had plans. By early April 2025, things were changing. London was about to turn 18. She was about to graduate. Her music was taking off. She had opportunities ahead of her. The relationship with Jaylen was falling apart, and that's when everything went wrong. April 5th, 2025. Around midnight, London was at home with her mother, but she needed to get her hair done, so she went to an older sibling's house. Hours later, in the early morning darkness, London asked her sister for a ride. The destination? Jaylen's house on Carlisle Street, 4 in the morning. Why would London need to go there at that hour? Was she picking up her belongings? Had Jaylen convinced her to give him one more chance? Had he told her they needed to talk? Nobody knows what was said in those final hours. But London's sister drove her to the house and watched her walk up to the door. That was the last time anyone saw London Thomas alive. Hours passed. London didn't call, didn't text, didn't reach out to her father, her grandmother, or any of her friends. By the next morning, her phone pinged in Westland, Michigan, miles away from where she was supposed to be, at Cooper Upper Elementary School. That's miles away from Carlisle Street in Inkster. Miles away from where London was supposed to be. Someone had taken her phone there, or driven there with it, or dumped it there to throw off the investigation. Her family knew immediately that something was wrong. On April 5th, London's sister filed a missing person report with Inkster police. The same day, she had dropped London off. The next day, London's mother filed another report with Detroit police. London's father, Cedric Salisbury, didn't wait for the police to do all the work. He took action himself. He posted on Facebook, reaching out to anyone who might have information. He organized search parties. He printed flyers with London's picture and offered a $2,500 cash reward for information leading to an arrest. Family members showed up, friends showed up, and then strangers started showing up. People who had never met London or her family saw the posts on social media and decided to help. They searched through woods, abandoned buildings. They combed through areas near Cooper Elementary School in Westland, where London's phone had been detected. Within days, Cedric had mobilized a massive community effort. Hundreds of people were looking for London. On April 12th, volunteers gathered in Westland to search. On April 17th, another massive search effort took place. Cedric printed hundreds of flyers with London's picture, her bright smile, her information, the reward offer. Those flyers went up all over Metro Detroit. But while the family was searching desperately, while the community was rallying to help find London, investigators had their attention focused on one person, Jaylen Pendergrass. He was the last person to see London alive. She had been dropped off at his house, at his mother's house, and his behavior was raising red flags everywhere. Jaylen wasn't being cooperative with investigators. When they asked him questions, his answers didn't add up. He was evasive, vague, unhelpful. London's family noticed it too. The frustration was building. Here was this man who claimed to have loved London for 3 years, and now that she was missing, he wasn't doing anything to help find her. He wasn't organizing search parties. He wasn't sharing posts on social media. He wasn't pleading for her safe return. He was quiet, and his mother Charlotte was quiet too. By April 17th, investigators had enough suspicion to obtain search warrants for the house on Carlisle Street. Federal agents joined the operation. The FBI was now involved. Neighbors watched as law enforcement surrounded the property. Multiple vehicles, officers everywhere. They searched for hours, extracting data from phones, collecting evidence, looking for anything that could tell them what happened to London after she walked through that door. According to reports, what they found was concerning. Text messages, call logs, digital evidence that suggested something terrible had happened inside that house. But they still didn't have London. And without a body, without physical evidence, the case was complicated. Days turned into weeks. The community kept searching. London's family kept hoping. And then, on April 11th, something happened that nobody outside that house knew about. Charlotte Pendergrass made a phone call. She called a friend, someone she trusted, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. She told him she needed help moving something. It was sealed. It was heavy. And she needed it moved from her house in Inkster to a different location in Southfield. The friend agreed. He showed up that same day, and together they loaded a large plastic storage bin into a vehicle. The friend didn't ask what was inside. He didn't question why it needed to be moved. He didn't think it was strange that Charlotte wanted this done quietly. He just helped his friend and left. Charlotte directed him to park the vehicle on Millard Street in Southfield. About 15 miles from her house, the SUV sat there in a residential driveway, week after week. Nobody reported it as suspicious. Nobody questioned why it was there. Nobody looked inside. And Charlotte went back to her regular life. But her friend couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. London's face was everywhere. On the news, on social media, on flyers all over the city. Search parties were happening daily. London's family was offering a reward. The FBI was involved. And Charlotte, whose son had been the last person to see London alive, had asked him to move a sealed storage bin. The pieces started coming together in his mind. What was in that bin? Why did it need to be moved in secret? Why hadn't Charlotte mentioned anything about London's disappearance when they talked? For 2 weeks, these questions ate at him. Finally, on April 26th, he couldn't take it anymore. He picked up the phone and called the Inkster Police Department. He told them everything about Charlotte's request, about the sealed bin, about where the SUV was parked. Investigators moved quickly. They drove to the address in Southfield, and there it was. The white SUV, exactly where Charlotte's friend said it would be. They approached carefully, opened the back of the vehicle, and inside was the plastic storage bin. When they opened it, they found 17-year-old London Thomas. The Wayne County medical examiner determined that London had died from asphyxiation. She had been in that bin for 3 weeks, 15 miles from where her family was searching, sitting in plain sight in a residential driveway. And Charlotte Pendergrass had known exactly where she was the entire time. The notification went out to London's family. Her father, Cedric, received the call on April 26th. It was his birthday. The day he was supposed to be celebrating became the worst day of his life. For 3 weeks, they had held on to hope. For 3 weeks, they had organized searches and printed flyers and refused to believe the worst. And now they had to face the reality that London was gone. The girl who was supposed to graduate next month. The girl who was supposed to go to prom. The girl who was building a music career. Gone. Within days of finding London's body, investigators made their first move. In May 2025, Charlotte Pendergrass was arrested and charged with lying to a peace officer in a violent crime investigation. During interviews with investigators, Charlotte had claimed that she saw London leave the house on April 5th. She said London walked out alive and well, but the evidence told a completely different story. Phone records showed London's phone had moved to Westland shortly after she arrived at the house. Video evidence contradicted Charlotte's timeline. London never left that house alive. Charlotte had lied to federal agents who were trying to find a missing teenager. She had deliberately obstructed the investigation while London's family was desperately searching. The family finally felt like justice was coming. But then, in August 2025, something shocking happened. The charges against Charlotte Pendergrass were dismissed. London's family gathered for what they thought would be a step forward in the case. Instead, they watched Charlotte Pendergrass walk out of court a free woman. The reason? A technicality buried in Michigan law. Charlotte had lied to FBI agents, federal investigators. But according to Michigan statute, an FBI agent doesn't qualify as a peace officer. The law specifically defines peace officers as Michigan State Police, county deputies, or local law enforcement, authorized under state jurisdiction. Federal agents don't fall under that definition. So even though Charlotte had clearly lied to investigators, even though she had obstructed a missing person investigation, even though she had helped hide London's body while her family searched, the charge couldn't stand. Charlotte's attorney celebrated the decision, but for London's family, this felt like a betrayal. They had watched Charlotte help cover up what happened to London. They knew she had lied. They knew she had moved London's body, and now she was walking free on a technicality. The question on everyone's mind was whether federal charges would be filed. Charlotte had lied to federal agents after all. But weeks passed, then months, and no federal charges came. Charlotte remained free, but investigators weren't done building their case. Throughout the summer of 2025, law enforcement continued working behind the scenes. They analyzed the evidence collected from the house on Carlisle Street. They interviewed witnesses. They built a timeline of exactly what happened after London walked through that door on April 5th. They gathered phone records, text messages, and digital evidence. They documented Charlotte's lies. They traced the movements of London's body from Inkster to Southfield, and they prepared for something bigger. On October 16, 2025, 6 months after London's body was discovered, bench warrants were issued. This time, it wasn't just Charlotte. Both Jaylen Pendergrass and his mother Charlotte Pendergrass were being charged, and this time, the charges were serious: second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. If convicted on the murder charge alone, both faced the possibility of life in prison. The arrests happened quickly. Both Jaylen and Charlotte were taken into custody. On October 17th, they appeared before Judge Sabrina Johnson at the 22nd District Court in Inkster for arraignment. Both entered pleas of not guilty through their attorneys. The prosecutor laid out why bond should be denied, or set extremely high. The prosecutor emphasized Charlotte's previous behavior, her lies to federal agents, her deliberate obstruction of the investigation. Charlotte's attorney pushed back hard. He argued that Charlotte had complied with every court order during her previous case, that she wasn't a flight risk, that she deserved a reasonable bond. But Judge Johnson had heard enough. She asked about Charlotte's employment, her living situation, how long she had been at her current address. Charlotte worked as a caregiver, not in home care, but for clients elsewhere. She had been at her current address for over a year. Judge Johnson considered all the factors: the seriousness of the charges, public safety, the allegations of lying to law enforcement, and then she made her decision. $5 million, cash bond, not a percentage, not a property bond. $5 million in cash. Charlotte would remain in custody unless someone could come up with $5 million in cash. Then it was Jaylen's turn. The prosecutor pointed out that Jaylen's situation was even more concerning. Jaylen had a pending case in Oakland County. He had been on house arrest, which was later reduced. And while out on bond, he had allegedly been arrested for suspected drunk driving. He hadn't been formally charged with that offense yet, but the fact that he had police contact while already on bond for another case showed a pattern. Jaylen's attorney tried to defend his client. He requested a bond of $100,000 cash with house arrest. But Judge Johnson asked a critical question. Was Mr. Pendergrass working at or around the time of the incident? The answer? No. Jaylen hadn't been working in April when London disappeared, and he wasn't working before that either. Judge Johnson made her decision quickly. And so the court is going to remand Mr. Pendergrass, set no bond given the nature of the charges. No bond. Jaylen would remain in jail until trial. Both mother and son were now in custody, both facing second-degree murder charges, both facing the possibility of life in prison. For London's family, this was the moment they had been waiting for since April. 6 months of waiting, 6 months of frustration, 6 months of watching Charlotte walk free on a technicality. But now, both defendants were in custody, both facing serious charges, and the legal process was finally moving forward. London's family had buried her on what would have been her 18th birthday. Instead of celebrating London's graduation, they held a funeral. Instead of watching her walk across that stage, they placed her in the ground. Instead of seeing her pursue her music career, they played her songs at her memorial. The questions that haunt this case go beyond just what happened inside that house on April 5th. They go to the heart of how our system protects children, or fails to protect them. How does a 20-year-old man start a relationship with a 14-year-old girl? How does that relationship continue for 3 years without legal intervention? Where were the mandatory reporters? Where were the teachers who must have known? Where were the systems designed to identify and stop this exact situation? London's family has faced criticism online. People questioning why they allowed the relationship to continue. People blaming them for not doing more. But the reality is more complicated than a comment section can understand. Parents can tell their children not to see someone. They can forbid relationships. They can set boundaries. But when a child is being manipulated by someone older, someone who knows how to exploit their vulnerability, those boundaries become harder to enforce. London's family knew she wasn't supposed to be with Jaylen. They didn't approve. They tried to stop it. But London kept going back, because that's what happens when a child is under the influence of someone who has taken advantage of their trust. They don't see the danger. They don't recognize the manipulation. They believe they're making their own choices. And by the time they realize what's happening, it's often too late. London was about to break free. She was about to turn 18, about to graduate, about to pursue her dreams. The relationship with Jaylen was ending, and that's when everything fell apart. The prosecution will have to prove what happened inside that house on April 5th. They'll have to show why London died, how she died, who was responsible. They'll have to explain why Charlotte helped move London's body, why she lied to investigators, why she let London's family search for 3 weeks while knowing exactly where London was. The defense attorneys will argue their client's innocence. They'll challenge the evidence. They'll present alternative theories. That's how the justice system works. But one thing is certain. London Thomas should still be alive. She should be 19 years old now. She should have graduated high school in May 2025. She should be pursuing her music career, making new tracks, building her following. Instead, her family visits her grave. The trial will eventually reveal what happened in that house. The evidence will be presented. Witnesses will testify. And a jury will decide whether Jaylen and Charlotte Pendergrass are guilty of taking London's life. But regardless of the outcome, the larger questions remain. How do we protect children from adults who prey on them? How do we identify these inappropriate relationships before they turn deadly? How do we create systems that intervene when a 20-year-old is pursuing a 14-year-old? And how do we teach young people to recognize the warning signs of manipulation and control? London's case has sparked conversations across social media. People debating responsibility, arguing about blame, discussing what should have been done differently. But beneath all those debates is a simple truth. A 17-year-old girl went to her ex-boyfriend's house at 4 a.m, and she never came home. Her family searched for 3 weeks. Her community rallied to help find her. Hundreds of people gave their time and energy to bring London home. And the entire time, her body was sitting in a storage bin 15 miles away, hidden by the very people who should have been helping to find her. Justice for London. Thomas means holding the right people accountable. It means a trial where the evidence is presented fairly and thoroughly. It means a jury that weighs the facts carefully and reaches a verdict based on the law. But justice for London also means something bigger. It means having conversations about how we protect vulnerable young people. It means recognizing the warning signs of inappropriate relationships. It means creating systems that intervene before tragedies happen. London Thomas had dreams. She had talent. She had a family that loved her, and she deserved the chance to live long enough to see those dreams come true. The trial of Jaylen and Charlotte Pendergrass will determine their legal fate, but London's story should serve as a reminder to all of us. When we see something that doesn't look right, we have to speak up. When we see an adult pursuing a child, we have to intervene. When we see warning signs of danger, we have to act, because the alternative is what happened to London Thomas, a bright, talented 17-year-old girl whose life was cut short before she ever got the chance to see what she could become. Rest in peace, London Ryan Thomas. Your family will never stop fighting for justice in your name.